I would like to tell you a story. During the pandemic, to be more precise, during the lockdown, I went to the supermarket. I just entered, and out of nowhere, a lady jumped out screaming at me, "Are you crazy? Are you nuts? What's wrong with you? Do you want to infect us all?" And I was like, "What? What did I do?" And then she said, "You are not wearing a mask." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, true, I'm not wearing a mask." So I thought for a moment, will I yell back? Or will I explain her I really had a rough day and I seriously didn't even realize I wasn't wearing a mask? But as I observed her, the way how she was, full of tension, red hat, her eyes literally popped out of her head and back again, I thought like, okay, no matter what I'm going to say to her, it's not going to enter her brain anyway. So I decided not to say anything except apologizing, putting on my mask, and I knew her amygdala was on fire. So whose amygdala, and what does this has to do with this incident? Well, in order to explain you this, I would like to take you on a little journey into our brain. Well, the amygdala. The amygdala is famous for fear, anxiety, and aggression. So every time something is happening around this, amygdala yells, "Yeah, that's me, that's my part." So as the amygdala is the center of the brain, there are actually two little amygdalas. So there is not only one amygdala. And what I personally find very interesting as a researcher, the amygdala has an own memory, so an own memory stick, if you want to call it. And every time something fearful happens, every time something has to do with aggression, the amygdala remembers. And not only that the amygdala remembers, the amygdala gets more efficient. So the amygdala has the ability to change. That's quite interesting. We call that neuroplasticity. And luckily, not every part of the brain has this ability. Why I'm saying this? Because believe me, you don't want that the part of the brain is changing that is responsible for heartbeat and breath, and in the morning you wake up and what's on today? So I think it's a quite good thing that not everything in the brain is changing, but the amygdala does. And now we have figured out who is amygdala. Now we need to know how is the amygdala actually activated. Well, we are receiving information from the outside world, and we are consuming this. And by the time we hear, see, feel, taste it, our brain decides dangerous or not dangerous. Well, in case it's dangerous, it transfers signals to the amygdala. Well, what happened during the pandemic? During the pandemic, constantly in the radio, you could hear COVID, death, COVID. And although some of my clients claim, yeah, well, you know what, I'm not listening to the TV or in the background or radio, and I'm also not reading news like everything what's popping up. I said, yeah, but by the time it popped up on your phone or it's in the background, your brain has heard or read it. It's enough that it's just for a moment. The news are designed that way that the headlines are immediately entering your head. And this is some kind of, we call this priming effect. And this priming effect is happening in the background, and that's the mean part. So we pair COVID with death, that's the priming. And by the time it's paired, next time when you hear COVID, you just think of death. And I think I don't need to tell you that death is something life-threatening, and therefore our amygdala screams, yeah, that's me, COVID. So now we understand how the amygdala is working. But what is happening then? Why did the lady behave the way she did? Well, the amygdala sends a signal to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that is directly connected to your body. To be more precisely, to the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is making you nervous. So the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for higher heartbeat, tension, so that you have the feeling like, I want to flee. So it's the fight or flight preparation. Back in the days when we faced a lion, well, nowadays when we face someone without a mask in a supermarket, it's more or less the same. My personal bad luck was that the lady decided to fight instead of flight. Would have been a funny picture running away from seeing that. Well, Luckily, we do also have the parasympathetic system. The parasympathetic system is cooling you down again. The parasympathetic system lets your heart beat a little bit slower. And you can activate the parasympathetic system consciously. That means by a specific breathing technique, you can activate the parasympathetic system and tell, listen, I need to relax a little bit more. And you can also, by regularly meditating, control this part. This is quite interesting because if you are, let's say, stage fright or you are afraid of an exam, then it's quite good to know these techniques. If anyone wants to know, I will tell you later on what it is. So, are women more anxious than men? Yes, they are. According to research, women are twice as often diagnosed with anxiety disorders than men. And some researchers even wanted to know, is that from birth? Is that like, are we designed to be that way, or is it happening? Well, interestingly, by the age of 11, girls and boys don't differ. There is no difference in anxiety. But by the age of 16, everything changes. By the age of 16, girls are 6 times more likely to suffer from anxiety. During the pandemic, everything just got worse. During the pandemic, women and men reported more anxiety disorders, more depression, more stress disorders. In general, everything just got worse. I think I don't need to tell you what happened during the pandemic. We were isolated. We had to deal with homeschooling. We had to deal with maybe new technologies because we had to work from home, even some home abuse. And all these additional stressors didn't make it easier to deal with that big fear of COVID still in our head, still thinking, oh my God, I might die, my kids might die, okay, maybe my husband might die, but my kids might die, and this is really horrible. So, by the way, I love my husband. So, why is that? Why are all these differences, and why are we women more anxious than men? Well, again, looking into research, there are many explanations. Scientists and theorists try to explain that from different angles. I have chosen 3 where I personally think they make perfectly sense, and as I'm always interested into neuropsychology, I have decided to tell you a little bit more about this one. So, number 1. Neuroscience says the amygdala is different. The amygdala is different between men and women because we have different chromosomes. And these chromosomes influence our DNA. And as we do have a different DNA, we also have a different concentration of sex hormones in our brain. And just recent research has found out that the amygdala has receptors for sex hormones. That's quite new. So that's one of the reasons why these sex hormones influence our amygdala in structure, but also in function. So the structure is that the man's amygdala, for instance, is a little bit bigger. And the function is that we women use more the left amygdala, whereas the men use more the right amygdala. And what does this change? Well, as we use the left amygdala, quite interestingly, we have the capability of recalling memories from the past that were emotional in a very fast way. And not only that they are very fast, they're also very rich and vivid, so we can feel them as they were in the past. I think women here in the audience know how it is when we argue with men, and men say, yeah, well, okay, that happened, whatever, but we are still like furious, and we think like, yeah, well, I'm really still angry, I'm mad at you, and men are like, whoa, that's like 2 years ago, seriously. But we women, now you can say my left amygdala, that's the reason, now you know it. So the left amygdala is responsible for us being so super emotional. Good. As we know now that, okay, we differ in the amygdala, what else? So the social psychology looked into parenting. Parenting doesn't differ in the beginning, obviously. So we treat boys and girls the same. They're cute, they're little, we cuddle them, we hug them. But what happens by the time they grow up? Boys, by the age of 13, 14, for instance, they're already as tall as their moms or tall as their dads. They're getting stronger, a little bit more muscles. And by that time, we don't have the need anymore of protecting boys. Whereas the girls, we still have this kind of feeling, they're cute, even though, oh, my cute little girl, probably tall like this, but still, cute little girl, we keep protecting them. And as we protect them, for us it's also fine to let them cry. And we let them also be emotional and maybe even weak. It's also, everything is fine with girls. But with boys, when they come home and say with 15, the boys at school are mean, then you would think like, seriously? You're crying now? Come on, you can deal with that. You're a big boy. So that's how we start changing in our parenting. That's why researchers believe that the amygdala of girls is more active, more trained, because we allow them to suffer. We allow them to be more emotional. Next explanation comes from social neuropsychology, the mindset of men. Well, as I said, we obviously parent our children in a different way. There's also general mindset how men should be. Some of you maybe remember the advertising of the Marlboro Man, a very strong man. Can you imagine the Marlboro Man talking about emotions or going to the therapy and saying, I really feel anxious, my horse wasn't fast enough or whatever. So the picture just doesn't fit, right? And that's how a lot of men perceive themselves. So they perceive themselves as the caretaker, as the one who's responsible for the family. Well, and due to this mindset, they don't seek for professional help. And therefore, some researchers believe that there are not enough data on men regarding anxiety. So the gap between women and men is maybe it's just an assumption, not as big as assumed. Well, as you have now some explanations why we differ and why we women are more emotional, I would like to give you 6 recommendations how you can overcome fear or how you can deal better with fear. Just to say this, these are my personal 6 favorites, and they appear to be very effective in my coaching sessions. They appear to be very efficient, and believe me, executives are always about time efficiency. So no matter what, it needs to be effective and efficient. And there are many treatments and recommendations out there. They're as good as these, but as I said, these are just my favorite ones. Besides, I really would like to point out, if you are dealing with anxiety disorder or you have the feeling that fear is changing your life, I would kindly ask you to seek for professional help, because this is just one recommendation, or 6 actually. So, be aware. Be aware what you are doing in the moment, and be aware of the noise and the influences around you. Be aware what advertising and news are trying to do with you. So read these things with more focusing on these things. And this is already leading to this next recommendation. Try to exclude all negative informations or sources if you don't need them. If you want to read news, then do it. Take your time during the day. I specifically have 2 times at the day, in the morning and in the evening, not before you go to bed. That's, again, not that good, reading news before you go to sleep, because your brain still works during your sleep. So take your time and do it with awareness. And don't let, let's say, outside noise, outside environment influence your brain. Move. So I'm specifically, again, not saying go to the gym and exercise, because that wouldn't be time efficient. But I say move. Take the stairs. Have a walk. Take the bike instead of the car. Or play with your kids a little bit more extensively. Every time you move, your body is sending signals to your brain, and your brain thinks, yeah, my human is using finally the body what's designed for. And that makes your brain happy, to make it short. Well, if you take a walk, would be lovely to take that walk outside of the office or outside of your room. So get fresh air, get sunlight into your eyes. Don't wear a sunglass because later on you can, but they say the more sunlight is entering our pupils, the more serotonin and dopamine is increasing. So it's making you happy again. Reduce consumption of alcohol. And in case you're already dealing with fear, my personal recommendation, just avoid alcohol. Alcohol is changing chemicals in your brain. And maybe some of you who have tried alcohol already, you probably remember that you are a little bit more emotional when you drink alcohol, or the day after you are moody, not to speak of hangovers, but you are maybe a little bit more moody than usual. And this is because the chemicals are changing some patterns in your brain. Not good if you're already dealing with fear. Last but not least, socialize in the real world. We humans are designed to be social species. No friends on Facebook, no friends on Instagram, no hearts or kisses on the internet are gonna replace your real friends in the real world. Even if you are still maybe afraid of COVID, then go outside so you can immediately take number 4, get fresh air and walk with distance. All this is better than just having some virtual friends. We people are, as I said, designed to be a social species. We are in a group, in a peer. And research has also found out that isolation is activating one molecule in our brain called the tachocinin. And the tachocinin is responsible for increasing fear. So isolation causes fear and anxiety. Well, to keep it maybe short, all these recommendations are hopefully good for you. But there's one thing I would like to tell you. Just do whatever makes you happy. And the more happy you are, the less the amygdala has a reason to work. So I would like to say thank you for listening and wish you a wonderful day.